Hey little dreamers! Ready for a magical bedtime adventure? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a sleepy tale. Let's go! Once upon a time, in the quiet and ever-curious Kingdom of Hushmore, something truly peculiar occurred every evening at exactly 7:03 p.m. That's when King Hushmore's crown vanished. Not in some dramatic magical puff of smoke, no, but with a gentle, almost subtle grace. One moment, the king's golden crown was resting proudly on his royal head. The next, it was gone. Vanished, as if it had never existed at all. It wasn't that the crown was lost or stolen. No, it simply disappeared, leaving nothing but the soft outline of where it had once sat. The strange part, it was only at night, and only at that very moment. By morning, the crown would return, perched once again on the king's head as though it had never left. Now, the kingdom was used to a lot of odd things. After all, this was the land where even the clouds had a curious habit of changing shape depending on what the villagers were thinking. But this crown business was different. No one knew what was happening, not even the king himself. At first, there was speculation about hidden magic or perhaps some ancient curse that had resurfaced. But whatever the cause, the result was always the same. The kingdom had to adjust. The people didn't fret. Oh no, in fact, they found ways to make it rather charming. It wasn't long before strange, yet endearing customs began to spring up, each one inspired by the king's invisible crown. At 7:03 p.m. each night, the kingdom would pause, just for a moment, to honor the king's mysterious crown, and those moments quickly became the highlight of the day. As the days passed in the Kingdom of Hushmore, the mystery of the invisible crown became something of a nightly spectacle. The kingdom, though puzzled by the strange occurrence, found itself adapting in ways that were as curious as they were charming. While King Hushmore's crown disappeared every evening at precisely 7:03 p.m., the people of Hushmore had found their own ways to embrace this peculiar magic. And none did so more enthusiastically than the royal pigeons. These were no ordinary pigeons. Oh no, they were royal pigeons, grand in their own right, and their feathers shimmered with a soft iridescence of silver and purple. Each evening, as the clock struck 7:03, the pigeons would flutter into the throne room, their wings beating in perfect unison. But rather than simply perching as birds typically do, these pigeons had developed a rather unusual habit. They would, without fail, bow to the empty space where King Hushmore's crown had once been. At first, the behavior was puzzling to the kingdom's inhabitants. The pigeons would fly in, their wings swooping elegantly, and each would drop their head in an exaggerated bow toward the air above the king's head. And it wasn't a simple dip of the head, no. This was a deep, dignified bow, as if they were acknowledging the invisible presence of something far greater than themselves. The royal pigeons were not just honoring the crown, they were honoring the absence of it. They understood, perhaps better than anyone, that the king's crown held a power not necessarily visible to the eyes. It was as though the pigeons had adopted a ritual born out of pure instinct, acknowledging the intangible, and doing so with grace. Some of the kingdom's children were delighted by this spectacle, giggling at the pigeons' behavior. They would point, whispering to their parents about the curious birds bowing to the empty air. Others in the kingdom marveled at how even the animals had adapted to the crown's mysterious vanishing. After all, if the pigeons could bow to nothing, then surely the rest of the kingdom could find a way to accept the crown's nightly disappearance. And so, the pigeons continued their nightly rituals, their graceful bows a strange but endearing part of the evening. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed like a simple habit, a flurry of wings and feathers, but to those who paid closer attention, it became clear. The pigeons were participating in something larger, something magical. And with each passing night, The people of Hushmore began to look forward to the moment when the pigeons would take their place in the throne room, poised to bow once again to the air. They didn't know why the crown disappeared or where it went, but in that moment of bowing, in that small ritual, they found a bit of comfort. The kingdom, in its own quirky way, had made peace with the invisible crown. And while the pigeons performed their daily bow, the people of Hushmore would carry on with their lives, grateful for the charm and whimsy that had taken over their once ordinary nights. As the royal pigeons carried on with their nightly ritual, something even more peculiar began to unfold within the Kingdom of Hushmore. The people, accustomed to the disappearing crown, started to notice another odd occurrence, something not as outwardly mystical as the pigeons bowing, but just as curious. Every night, just after 7:03 p.m., a soft plush cushion would appear on King Hushmore's throne. At first, it seemed like an innocent enough gesture. Perhaps the king's servants, preparing for his rest, had placed it there without anyone noticing. But no one could explain the cushion's timing. It wasn't just an ordinary cushion either. This cushion was perfectly shaped, as if it had been crafted for the very moment the crown disappeared. Each night, it would settle onto the throne with a gentle thud, its velvety fabric shimmering softly under the room's candlelight. The cushion had a rich, golden embroidery along its edges, which matched the fine details of the king's throne. It was as though the throne itself was anticipating the absence of the crown, preparing in its own way for the empty space above. The cushion was soft, deep, and inviting, a quiet comfort in the midst of the mystery. It grew into a kind of unspoken tradition among the people of Hushmore, as though they, too, were adapting to the strange rhythm of the king's crown disappearing each night. Children began to draw pictures of the cushion, leaving them as offerings for the king just as they did their imaginary crowns. The artists of the kingdom, inspired by this nightly occurrence, even began to craft little cushions of their own, presenting them to the royal family with hopes of gaining favor. It wasn't long before the royal guard, always watchful during the crown's nightly disappearance, took notice of the cushion too. Some whispered that the cushion, in its quiet way, was a sign of comfort and acceptance, a cushion that grew in the presence of the crown's absence, perhaps as a symbol of balance in the kingdom. The guards began referring to it as the throne's silent companion, a title which felt fitting. It was no longer just a cushion. It had become a part of the kingdom's response to the king's crown vanishing each evening. King Hushmore himself noticed the cushion, of course. He often looked down at it with a thoughtful gaze before sitting. At first, he wondered if it had been placed there out of habit or necessity. But after some time, he began to sense that the cushion, too, had its own kind of magic. It was there every night waiting for him. It had come to represent a quiet assurance, an unspoken reminder that the kingdom was at peace with the crown's nightly absence. Perhaps in its own gentle way, the cushion was also bowing to the king's invisible crown, preparing the throne for what was to come, just as the pigeons bowed. As time went on, the cushion became as much a part of the nightly ritual as the pigeons' bows. When the clock struck 7:03 p.m., the kingdom would pause, knowing that the crown was no longer present. But the cushion, always there, became a symbol of the kingdom's resilience. They had learned to accept the mystery of the invisible crown, and the throne had learned to accommodate it in a new, comforting way. For the people of Hushmore, it wasn't just about the crown. It was about finding harmony in the absence of things and understanding that even in the spaces left behind, there could still be beauty. It wasn't long before the children of Hushmore found their own way to connect with the invisible crown. Their imaginations, ever fertile and free, turned the kingdom's nightly mystery into an endless source of creativity. And so, in the spirit of the vanishing crown and the mysterious cushion, the children began to draw. They filled the palace walls with imaginary crowns, not ones made of gold or jewels, but rather vibrant and whimsical crowns of all shapes and sizes, made from whatever their young hands could conjure. Some of these crowns were drawn in bold, swirling strokes, a burst of color here and there. Others were adorned with strange and fantastical shapes. Asterisk asterisk floating stars asterisk asterisk, fluffy clouds, and even fluttering butterflies. It was as though each child was trying to capture the essence of the crown, something invisible, something magical, and present it in a way that their own eyes could see. They drew crowns that sparkled with colors never seen in the waking world, crowns with jewels that shifted in shape, and even crowns made of pure light. The children were careful with their drawings, sometimes leaving them under the king's pillow, at the foot of his throne, or tucked under the cushions in the royal hallway. They'd giggle among themselves, excited at the thought of the king discovering these gifts. They believed, without question, that if they could offer the king something from their imaginations, the invisible crown would somehow become real again, even if just for a moment. The palace staff in turn began to notice these drawings, often finding them in unexpected places. On the stairs, by the garden gates, even pinned to the walls of the kitchen. The staff would smile at the children's offerings, understanding that they were participating in a tradition all their own, one of hope and mystery, in which the very absence of the crown was a reason to celebrate. It was no longer just a peculiar ritual of the king's. It had become something the whole kingdom could partake in, each in their own way. At times, the children's crowns were so beautifully drawn that even King Hushmore himself couldn't help but admire them. He would pick up a drawing and hold it for a moment, studying the delicate strokes and the imaginative details. He marveled at how these little artists, with their wide-eyed wonder, could take something so intangible, something he himself couldn't always fully grasp, and turn it into something so real. Each drawing, with its playful patterns and bursts of color, seemed to embody the kingdom's spirit, a perfect balance between mystery and joy. One evening, after a particularly long day of royal duties, King Hushmore sat in his throne, gazing at the collection of crown drawings scattered before him. He smiled softly. The children's imagination had, in its own quiet way, filled the space left by the crown's nightly disappearance. And as he looked at their creations, something magical happened. For the first time he could almost see the crown, not with his eyes but with his heart. Perhaps, he thought, the crown wasn't gone at all. Perhaps it was simply in a different form, a form only visible to those with the purest hearts and minds. And so, with each passing night, the children of Hushmore continued to create their imaginary crowns, filling the royal halls with their colorful, heartfelt gifts. These drawings, often so simple in design, became the kingdom's tribute to the invisible crown, a way of honoring the mystery that bound them all together. The crown may have disappeared each night, but in its place was the ever-present creativity of the kingdom's youngest residents, a reminder that even in absence, there was beauty. The mystery of the disappearing crown grew even more curious as time went on. The kingdom, as the days passed, settled into a peaceful rhythm, their hearts lightened by the whimsical rituals that had emerged from the crown's nightly disappearance. It was during one of these tranquil nights that a new question began to swirl in the minds of the royal guard. They had grown accustomed to standing at attention during the nightly crown ritual, quietly keeping watch as King Hushmore's crown vanished with precision each night at 7:03 p.m. But something odd began to tug at their curiosity. What exactly was happening to the crown when it disappeared? At first, they had believed it to be simply an enchantment, a trick of magic. But after weeks of quiet vigil, they couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the story, if the crown was going somewhere otherworldly. They whispered to one another during their shifts, speculating where the crown could be vanishing to, and if perhaps it was more than just an absence. It might be part of something grander, something outside the realm of Hushmore. One night, as the clock struck 7:03, The royal guard positioned themselves in the usual spots, their eyes trained not on the king, but on the space above his head where the crown would typically rest. They had noticed something, a faint glow that hovered in the air just as the crown vanished, a soft, otherworldly shimmer that suggested the crown was moving. Slowly, a few members of the guard began to piece together a curious thought. The crown wasn't merely disappearing into thin air. It was likely traveling somewhere, beyond the waking world. A brave few decided to investigate further. And so, during one of their nightly watches, they decided to follow the crown's faint glow. At the stroke of 7:03, they silently trailed the shimmering light that seemed to rise from the empty throne, leading them down darkened corridors, past the royal gardens, and toward the farthest reaches of the palace grounds. The glow grew brighter and brighter, pulsing as if guiding them toward something hidden. The trail led them to a secret door, nestled between two ancient oak trees in the royal garden, a door that had long been forgotten by most. The guards approached the door with cautious excitement, unsure of what they would find beyond it. But as the door creaked open, they were greeted by a sight unlike any other. A vast, dreamlike realm, bathed in soft moonlight, where the stars seemed to hang just a little closer to the ground, twinkling as if they were alive. And there, in the middle of this ethereal land, was the crown, resting on a pedestal of mist, glowing with the same soft light it had emitted back in the throne room. The guards stood in awe, realizing that the crown was not gone as they had assumed, but rather, it was visiting a place beyond their comprehension. It wasn't just an object. It was a part of something greater, the Dream King's realm. As they gazed at the crown, resting peacefully in the Dream King's collection, a quiet understanding settled over them. The crown had made a pact with the Dream King. By day, it resided with King Hushmore in the waking world, and by night, it ventured to this mystical land where dreams were spun. The guards, feeling a sense of calm and reverence, made a vow to keep the secret safe. The kingdom would remain unaware, their lives filled with the comfort of their nightly rituals, unaware of the magical truth that lay beyond. From that night onward, the guards stood not just as protectors of the waking world, but as silent witnesses to the crown's travels between the realms, a constant reminder that some mysteries were meant to be kept hidden, allowing the kingdom to continue in peace. As the royal guards stood in awe within the Dream King's realm, their discovery left them speechless. The crown, softly glowing on its pedestal of mist, appeared almost alive, radiating an ethereal light that seemed to pulse with the beat of the dream realm itself. It was both beautiful and strange, its presence both familiar and foreign. The guards knew they had stumbled upon something far beyond the understanding of any mortal. The Dream King's realm was not just another world, but a place of pure magic, where time and space seemed to warp and flow like the very fabric of dreams. The Dream King himself had not appeared, yet the air around them hummed with his unseen presence. They could feel him, like a whisper on the wind, a presence that settled within the very atmosphere of the realm. It was as if the land itself was alive, breathing in the same way a dream would, fading in and out of focus, and yet always there, always in motion. The guards had expected to feel fear, or perhaps a sense of danger, but instead they felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The crown, resting gently on its pedestal, seemed to be a living bridge between the waking world and this fantastical dreamland. The guards realized then that the crown was not simply an artifact of power, but a conduit between these two realms, a messenger that traveled between the Dream King's domain and King Hushmore's kingdom. It was a pact, unspoken but undeniable, a promise made by the Dream King to the Kingdom of Hushmore that each night, the crown would travel from one world to the next, bearing the wisdom of both realms. The guards stood silently for what felt like an eternity, their eyes fixed on the crown. They knew they could not reveal what they had seen, not because they feared the Dream King's wrath, but because some mysteries were meant to remain hidden. The Kingdom of Hushmore would continue to live in blissful ignorance, and in turn, the crown would continue its journey, visiting the Dream King's realm each night to rest and renew. As the guards made their way back toward the hidden door, the glow of the realm began to fade, and the dreamlike atmosphere gradually receded, returning to the quiet darkness of the royal garden. The door, which had appeared so clearly to them moments before, now seemed to blur into the surroundings, as if it had never existed at all. They stepped back into the waking world, the gentle breeze of the garden now the only sound around them. The moon shone brightly overhead, casting a calm light on the ancient trees, and for the first time in their lives, the guards felt as though they had witnessed something sacred. Back in the palace, everything was as it should be. The world had not changed. The crown would reappear in the morning, once again resting on King Hushmore's head, and the kingdom would go about its day, unaware of the crown's mystical nightly journey. The guards returned to their posts, their eyes once more trained on the empty air where the crown had vanished moments before. But in their hearts, they carried the secret of the invisible crown, knowing that they were the keepers of a mystery far beyond anyone's comprehension. And so, the cycle continued. The crown, a symbol of royalty and power, traveled between two worlds, its absence at night only strengthening its significance, its journey a quiet reminder that even in the unknown there was peace. The Kingdom of Hushmore slept soundly, blissfully unaware of the magic that connected them to the land of dreams, where their crown rested, and where mysteries remained forever untold. The discovery of the Dream King's realm was a secret that the royal guards kept to themselves. For many days after their journey, they carried the knowledge of the crown's true nightly adventure with them in quiet reverence, knowing it was a truth meant to remain hidden. However, it wasn't just the royal guard who had learned to live with the mystery of the invisible crown. Slowly, the kingdom began to adjust to the rhythms and rituals that had become a part of their daily lives, from the pigeons bowing to empty air to the cushion that magically appeared each night on King Hushmore's throne. But there was one small tradition that had taken root among the people, one that brought them all together each evening: crown passing hour. It wasn't an official holiday, nor was it anything that the king had decreed. It simply happened, a quiet, shared moment of reflection and connection. Every night at 7:03 p.m., the kingdom would pause, whether in the fields or in the marketplace, in the streets or in their homes. The soft chimes of the royal clock would ring, and for one brief sacred moment, the entire kingdom would acknowledge the invisible crown's journey. Children would yawn and stretch, as if they too had learned to feel the soft pull of the crown's passing. In the quiet homes, families would exchange a brief, affectionate glance before settling into their evening routine. The marketplace would become hushed, with merchants and villagers pausing to bow their heads, as if honoring the king without him ever knowing. At the palace, King Hushmore himself would lean back on his throne, feeling a gentle tug at his heart as the crown disappeared once again. His eyes would flutter closed for just a moment, and in that moment, he would find himself connected to the Dream King, knowing that the crown was resting somewhere in the vast expanse of the dream realm, somewhere beyond the waking world. The people of Hushmore didn't need to understand all the intricacies of the crown's magic. They didn't need to know that the crown wasn't truly gone, nor did they need to learn of the kingdom's silent pact with the Dream King. All they knew was that at 7:03 p.m. each night, something magical happened. A shift in the air, a soft, collective acknowledgement of the unseen, and that was enough. It wasn't long before crown passing hour became a time for reflection, a brief, shared moment of quiet serenity. People began to celebrate this hour in small ways, lighting candles, drawing close to loved ones, or offering up their own little gifts to the invisible crown. It was no longer something to be puzzled over, but a moment of peace, a ritual that bound the entire kingdom together. The most cherished part of this hour, however, was the silent yawn salute that spread across the kingdom. It wasn't a formalized gesture, but rather something that naturally happened. It was as if, during those few seconds, the entire kingdom yawned at once, in quiet unison, as though acknowledging the magic that was slipping between the waking world and the realm of dreams. It was a tender, peaceful moment, marked by the soft stretch of tired limbs and the quiet understanding that the invisible crown would continue its journey, leaving behind nothing but the faintest glow in the hearts of those who believed in its power. And so, night after night, the Kingdom of Hushmore carried on, honoring the invisible crown in their own quiet ways. The throne room remained empty each night as the king's crown traveled to the Dream King's collection, but the throne, with its cushion, and the pigeons, with their graceful bows, continued to serve as reminders of the unseen magic that linked the waking world and the land of dreams. The kingdom, in its own humble way, had learned to live with mystery and magic, embracing the unknown with a heart full of wonder. As the days and nights of Hushmore continued, the tradition of crown passing hour took on a deeper significance, woven into the fabric of the kingdom's daily life. The invisible crown, the pigeons' bows, and the soft glow of the cushion on King Hushmore's throne became part of the kingdom's collective heartbeat. What began as an enigmatic and unexplainable occurrence had slowly turned into a comforting, unifying rhythm that connected everyone, from the smallest child to the oldest elder. However, just as the kingdom began to grow accustomed to the crown's mysterious disappearance, an unexpected event stirred a sense of wonder and excitement. A new festival was declared in honor of the invisible crown, one that would coincide with the changing of the seasons, a celebration of the crown's journey between worlds. This new festival, aptly named the Passing of the Crown, would celebrate the crown's journey through the realms of dreams and waking life. But what was most enchanting about this event was not the festivities themselves, but the special, mystical moment when the entire kingdom would be invited to contribute their own dreams and wishes. The festival would begin at dusk, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the moon began to rise. The kingdom's streets were filled with flickering lanterns, casting a soft, golden glow on the cobblestones. People from all walks of life gathered in the town square, where a large, ornate pedestal had been placed, its surface covered with glowing, silvery mist. The pedestal was meant to represent the Dream King's realm, and in a poetic gesture, the kingdom would offer their dreams for the coming year, to be carried by the crown on its nightly journey. At the heart of the celebration, each person was invited to bring their dreams and wishes to the pedestal. Children drew whimsical, fantastical crowns and filled them with wishes of wonder. Adults wrote notes of hope, and some even attached small trinkets or tokens, believing that these little objects would be carried by the crown to the Dream King, each item a piece of the kingdom's heart. King Hushmore, ever the gracious ruler, stood at the pedestal with a quiet smile, watching as the townspeople came forward, placing their dreams on the pedestal with reverence. His heart swelled with pride and peace as the kingdom united, each person offering a tiny piece of their own spirit to the mysterious crown's journey. The pigeons, too, participated in the festival, flying in as dusk fell, performing their nightly bow to the empty air. The soft ritual added to the sense of magic, as though even the animals understood the sacredness of this moment. As the evening progressed, the time would come for the final act of the festival, the crown's passing, when the kingdom would come together in a grand collective gesture. At exactly 7:03 p.m., when the crown was expected to vanish for its nightly journey, the entire square would fall silent. Everyone would raise their heads in a shared moment of stillness, and a soft, collective yawn salute would pass through the crowd like a wave. It wasn't just a physical stretch, it was a symbolic gesture, a way of connecting the dreams of the waking world with those of the Dream King. Then, as if by magic, a faint glow would rise from the pedestal, swirling into the air before gently fading into the night sky. The invisible crown was on its way once more, moving between the two realms, carrying with it the dreams and wishes of an entire kingdom. The people of Hushmore would watch in quiet awe as the crown's light faded into the distance, knowing that their hopes, wishes, and dreams were part of something much larger than themselves. The festival would close with a final, serene moment of quiet reflection. Families would gather around bonfires, exchanging stories of the past year and dreaming of the future, content in the knowledge that the invisible crown would continue to carry their dreams into the land of Nod, where the Dream King would weave them into the fabric of his realm. And so, year after year, the passing of the crown became a beloved tradition, an annual reminder of the unseen connections that bound the people of Hushmore together. It was a time for dreaming, for wishing, and for finding peace in the mysteries of the world, both seen and unseen. As the years passed, the festival of the passing of the crown became a cornerstone of life in the Kingdom of Hushmore. It was a celebration that transcended the bounds of the everyday, weaving together the lives of the kingdom's people in a shared sense of mystery and wonder. Each year, more and more citizens found themselves gathering in the town square at dusk, offering up their dreams, hopes, and wishes with heartfelt sincerity. The festival had grown beyond a simple celebration of the invisible crown. It had become a time to reflect on the mysteries of the world, to honor the unseen, and to acknowledge that there was magic in the quiet moments of life. But as much as the festival was celebrated outwardly, there was a deeper, quieter change that began to unfold within the kingdom. The people of Hushmore had learned to live with mystery, to embrace the unknown without fear. They had seen the crown disappear, the pigeons bow, and the cushions settle gently onto the throne each night. And yet, they had come to understand that these things were not anomalies or tricks. They were gifts that bound the waking world to the land of dreams. And it was in that understanding that the kingdom had found its true peace. King Hushmore, now older and wiser, had come to embrace this peace as well. He had spent many quiet hours pondering the mysteries that surrounded his crown. At times, he had questioned the nature of his reign, the very essence of his power. What did it mean to rule over a kingdom where the crown disappeared every night? Was his power truly his own, or was it something shared with the Dream King? Yet, with each passing year, he had come to realize that the crown, though invisible at night, was never truly lost. It was merely passing through, traveling to a realm where dreams were made, and where the unseen became real. In his private moments, King Hushmore would sit by the royal window, gazing out over the kingdom as it prepared for bed. He would think of the thousands of dreams that were being whispered into the night, dreams of adventure, of hope, of love. And he would smile softly, knowing that the invisible crown was carrying them all, just as it had carried the dreams of his ancestors. The people of Hushmore, too, had come to understand that their lives were intertwined with the invisible crown in ways they could never fully grasp. It wasn't about the crown itself, nor was it about the nightly ritual that had become such a central part of their lives. It was about something more, a sense of connection that transcended time, space, and even reality. The crown was a symbol, a reminder that there was magic in the world, even if it couldn't always be seen. And so, the kingdom continued to live with this quiet knowledge. The festival grew each year, more vibrant and more meaningful, but it was the quiet moments, the ones that occurred every night at exactly 7:03 p.m., that held the true magic. The pigeons would bow, the cushion would settle, and the kingdom would pause to honor the invisible crown's journey. And in those moments, every person in Hushmore would feel, deep in their hearts, that they were part of something much larger than themselves, something that connected them all to the land of dreams and the vast, unknowable universe beyond. The invisible crown, it seemed, would never truly disappear. It was simply passing through, carrying with it the dreams, hopes, and wishes of a kingdom that had learned to embrace the mystery, knowing that sometimes the greatest magic lies not in what we can see, but in what we can only imagine. As time went on, the Kingdom of Hushmore remained a place of quiet wonder, where mystery and magic coexisted harmoniously with the rhythms of daily life. The people had long since ceased to question the invisible crown's journey. It had become as much a part of their lives as the seasons, the rising of the sun, and the changing of the moon. The crown's nightly passing, the bowing pigeons, the mysterious cushion on the throne. All these things had settled into the kingdom's collective memory, becoming symbols of peace and unity. King Hushmore, now older and filled with the quiet wisdom of years, had come to accept the crown's nightly disappearance as an act of grace. It was a reminder, he realized, that the greatest gifts are often those that cannot be seen, touched, or fully understood. His kingdom had learned to live in the mystery, to embrace the unseen, and to honor what could not be explained. On the night of the 10th anniversary of the festival, the king sat alone in his chamber, reflecting on the journey he had taken with his people. The once puzzling mystery of the invisible crown had become the heart of the kingdom, a thread that connected the waking world to the realm of dreams. It was no longer a source of confusion, but a source of pride. The festival, now a beloved tradition, had blossomed into something far greater than anyone could have anticipated. It had become a celebration not just of the crown's passing, but of the kingdom's shared belief in something larger than themselves. Outside, the gentle glow of lanterns flickered in the streets, and the soft murmur of voices echoed in the air as families gathered in the square to prepare for the evening celebration. The air was crisp, and the stars above shone brightly, as if the night itself was holding its breath in anticipation. In the royal throne room, the cushion was already in place, awaiting the king's return to his throne. King Hushmore rose from his chair and moved to the window, looking out over the kingdom. He could feel the pull of the crown's absence, the way it connected him to something beyond the mortal world. For the first time, he understood that his power as a ruler was not tied to the crown itself. It was the shared dream of the people of Hushmore, their collective belief in magic, mystery, and the unseen, that made the kingdom strong. The king smiled softly, his heart filled with peace. He knew that the crown's nightly disappearance was not a loss, but a gift, an invitation to journey beyond the boundaries of the waking world and into the realm of dreams. And with that realization came a deep sense of gratitude. As the clock in the palace tower struck 7:03 p.m., signaling the beginning of crown passing hour, the king made his way to the throne room. He paused at the door, taking a deep breath, feeling the presence of his people, those who, like him, had come to understand the beauty of the invisible crown. In the square, the people raised their heads in unison, silently acknowledging the crown's passing, their hearts filled with quiet wonder. The pigeons, as they always did, took their place in the air, bowing gracefully to the empty space where the crown had once rested. The kingdom was still, peaceful, and united in a shared belief that transcended the ordinary. The king sat on his throne, the cushion beneath him, his heart aligned with the kingdom's collective spirit. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the invisible crown's absence, and in that silence, he knew the truth. The crown had never truly been gone. It was simply waiting for the moment when it would once again return to the dream realm, carrying the wishes of a kingdom that believed in magic and mystery. As the soft glow of the crown faded into the night, King Hushmore allowed himself to rest, content in the knowledge that the kingdom would continue, united by its shared belief in the unseen. The invisible crown, he realized, was not just an object of power. It was a symbol of hope, of connection, and of the dreams that lived within each and every person in Hushmore. And so, as the kingdom settled into the quiet of night, King Hushmore closed his eyes, knowing that, though the crown might vanish every evening, it would always return, just as the dreams of the kingdom would always be carried through the night, safely cradled in the hands of the Dream King.